View from the Gutters, episode 45. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Billi 99, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 5301.
It does.
What are
Emerald City.
Candy
Comic-Con.
Candy Comic-Con, EC3.
EC4.
EC4.
Oh,
Emerald City Candy Comic-Con.
blowing shit up.
ECCCC.
Yeah.
EC. Anyways, episode 45.
Yeah, View from the Gutters, episode 45. I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Joe Preddy.
I'm Matt McGinnis.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
And I'm Cade Reynolds.
And today we're talking about Billi 99, which was a fan recommendation pick, so...
Yeah, good job, fans.
It was.
Yeah, thank you. It was Matt, right?
Mark.
Whatever. I mean, yeah, we love you, Mark.
Way to diss Mark.
Well, I don't read the emails. You know that.
No, it's cool.
Direct him at
We
Joe.
all read all the emails.
I don't even think it was forwarded to you.
It was eventually. I skimmed it. Direct all your emails to Joe Preddy at View from the Gutters.
I'll take care of them.
Everyone knows I can't read. Toby, you pitched it though officially.
Technically, I officially pitched this book.
So do you want to give us a rundown on what you thought of this?
Oh, God.
Or do you want to go last?
It's not so much that I want to go last, it's just that I'm not really sure what I think about this book. I mean, I had so many mixed feelings about it. I mean, I really liked the concept.
Mm-hmm.
I liked about half the art. And not like, I like this thing and I don't like this thing, but like, every single page I was like, I like about half the things that are happening here.
Yeah.
And then like the ending just kind of petered out in a way that I felt unsatisfied by. Because basically like you got this conflict building.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to the end and it's like, wow, the villain has like totally won because there's just like not anything that we can do against him.
Mm-hmm.
And so the boyfriend, whatever the fuck his name is like, oh, well, I'll just confess that I know that this guy is the bad guy and that he hired me to do this thing.
Well, no, he convinces that he killed...
Yeah, he takes credit for the death of her father.
Right.
And it's like, that guy hired me to do it. And he hired somebody to do it, but not that guy.
Right.
And they have no proof. And so he basically just lies
Well, what it does...
to get him in prison and then pretends to kill himself. And then, like, escapes to Europe.
Yeah, more than getting the bad guy in prison, what it does is it exonerates Billi, which allows her to take control of her company again. So even if that guy doesn't go to jail, because it's not really clear whether or not the bad guy actually goes to jail or not, he has no control over the company anymore, so she's able to regain her 40% shares and, like, run her company again, which is all she really wanted.
Yeah, which is cool, but it kind of deprotagonizes her.
A little bit,
Because
except
she, like, the victory doesn't happen because of anything that she did.
no. In fact, she fucks up the only evidence that can convict him. But what I like about that is she is a new hero learning how to do shit. You know, like she doesn't come in. She doesn't have the handbook. Her dad didn't train her. She just kind of wanders into it. And so when the police captain is there with her when she finds the evidence, the condom wrapper, and she touches it, essentially contaminating the evidence, and is like, oh, we're fucked now. Even though that had been there for a while and probably didn't have his prints on it anyway, but now it's like completely unusable.
Yeah, I mean, that thing had to have been sitting next to the ocean for at least 24 hours.
Right. So that evidence was basically destroyed anyway, but what he was telling her was like, you still fucked up, even though we probably could have never used that. And so
I kind of liked, because I felt like it was like you were saying, she's a new up and coming superhero, and I kind of felt that it harkened back to like the really old school Batman detective story.
Oh, totally, yeah. I see shades of like early Batman in this when he's like, he shows up on the scene and criminals don't respect him at all. And that's what happens to her, is it's like, oh, it's a Sword of Toleado. Wait, it's not. I thought he was a big fat guy. It's this, like, tiny girl now. We can take her. And then they don't. They give her no respect. Like, she instills no fear in them. So she's not exactly great at being the Sword of Toledo, and whether or not she's going to continue that after the end of the story is unclear, which is something like I kind of like. Is what made her move into the Cordon and like try to protect people was the fact that she has no money because she has no control over her company anymore, and she has nothing else to do. Like she has to fight for what she believes in, but as a head of a corporation, a CEO of a corporation, essentially, she's a lot more powerful than she is as a Sword of Toledo.
Which is almost being a superhero in and of itself.
Well, it's more realistic to me because...
Well, I think that's ultimately the point of the book, is that it's basically deconstructing Batman and saying, look, the important part about Batman is not that he goes out into the street at night and beats up thugs.
Right.
It's who Bruce Wayne is and what he can do in the boardroom. Like, that's where the real power is. Like, he should legitimately be spending all of his effort improving people's lives so they don't have to turn to crime.
Right. And I think that's something, it's a good criticism of the Batman mythos, I think, is because Bruce Wayne is a lot more powerful as Bruce Wayne than he is as Batman, but what he provides for Gotham as Batman is hope. And that's something that he doesn't really do a good job of providing as Bruce Wayne, because these people have learned to not trust corporations. And in a setting like the Cordon, they definitely don't trust the corporation because they've been taken advantage of.
I think it was really interesting that the story isn't about Batman per se, because her father was the Batman figure.
Right.
And he dies before the story even starts.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's not even his biological daughter. She's somebody that he found in the Cordon and adopted.
Right.
So, I mean, she's very much a Dick Grayson or Tim Drake character.
Absolutely.
He was her father, because near the end she says, my uncle's not really my uncle, just a friend of my father's.
Yeah, but then they later say that she was adopted.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, and she does fulfill that role of Dick Grayson trying to become Batman after he is Nightwing, but unlike Dick Grayson, she has no training as Robin or Nightwing.
Right, but I think really what the important part of the story is that she is basically somebody from the bottom of society who has been kind of elevated up to the highest level, and she thinks that the important part of her father's legacy is being Batman.
Right.
But it's not. It's being Bruce Wayne.
Well, and she learns
and
that
it's the power that she has as a CEO.
I'm gonna say this. I think Batman is not an apt analogy. This is Zorro, right? This is a much earlier version of Batman.
Yeah, Batman is definitely draws on Zorro.
One of my big problems with the Batman trilogy is that, and one of the things I actually really like about Billy 99 is that there's an element of realness there. Mm-hmm. There is no Deus Ex Machina that comes through at the end that allows her to solve the case. Like when she gets to the end, she's fucked. Yeah. And she goes back and she's like, I'm going to face this regardless of the consequences. We'll figure it out as we go, but I have to do something.
Right.
And so that to me is a much more powerful action than Batman going to fight, Bane or doing something like that, where that he has plot protection because he's fucking Batman.
Right. And, and what I think that she learns too, as when she becomes a CEO, is she's already helped at least one person out of the Cordon, because you see the old man that used to live next to her is now her advisor.
Yeah.
And so she's already helped one person out of the Cordon. I think she
she doesn't help him out. He's some kind of weird wizardy figure.
Yeah.
And he manipulates the stock market or wins the lottery to basically just give himself money because he can do that because he's a wizard.
But she also just gives him that position too, which
right.
is
well, the
very
person
helpful.
The person that she really helps is her neighbor, who is down in the street, Karen
with the kids,
who's turning to prostitution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, she helps a lot. I mean, I think that's what she learns at the end of the story. Is it's not the Sword of Toledo that she is most apt at being.
It's Billy,
right? But when I think what's really cool about the story is when she can't be the head of the corporation, she still has the drive to help people, and I think that's what makes her heroic. I think she's a good hero character.
Oh yeah, when she's serving the prostitute that what's his face kills in the diner that causes her to lose her job.
Yeah,
right.
It's things like that. I think there was thought put into this, and the kind of character that Sarah Byam or Byam,
I think,
wanted to portray. There's definitely... She's telling a story about what it takes to be, that you don't have to kind of roam the night with an arsenal of weapons or any weapon at all. Like, the greatest weapon you have is just, like, helping people. Reaching out to help people.
And I think that's like furthered in the idea that she's terrible at being the Sword of Toledo,
Absolutely.
right? She does far less good as the Sword of Toledo. She kills like 2 or 3 people and is very distraught about it because her dad never killed anyone. She's very much of that mindset of like, try not to harm people, but they put her in shitty situations and she kind of is like, I there's nothing else I could have done.
I also thought that the story was really interesting in that, normally when people tout like, oh, this story is really realistic, it means that people are assholes and there's a lot of death and blood. And that's not what's realistic about this story. And I think it's because a lot of the characters are really complex. Like the father and son who are the heads of the union. And it's like, at one point they're like, talking about the son, and it's, do you think that this is the first person he's killed? Or that, it's like, he's not guilty of this murder, but that doesn't mean that he's innocent.
Right.
It's like, these guys are obviously, like, mafia thugs who are doing a lot of really shady shit and passing out guns.
In the tradition
but they're also
of,
trying to help people and, like, preserve the union and make sure that people still have jobs.
Yeah, I mean, in the tradition of, like, that very... the union and mob relationship.
Well, the Teamsters.
Like,
that's
for sure.
In the tradition of Hoffa and whatever, because they're not the union leaders, they're the mafia boss that have, and he says, I have friends, right? I don't, like, I have people that will listen to me. And then that's like one of my favorite scenes where he tells he's like, he just kicks the briefcase off the edge and he's like, I don't want your fucking money.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
I love the boyfriend character too, because like he's very much a bad man. Like he kills people in like quote unquote bad man. Like he kills people and he does terrible things. But at the end of the day, like he's an incredibly empathetic character because his love for Billy is like very genuine. And I think that romance angle of this book is so important to the core of this book because it shows you a lot about both of those characters, and they're important characters.
Ultimately, what I like the most about this book is that it's unhindered by this kind of really simple black and white superhero philosophy and morality that hinders a lot of I think more interesting stories. It's that God, I can never remember his name, but yeah, the mafioso she's in love with. He is a sympathetic character. He's willing to sacrifice himself for Billy without thinking about it. But he's also a cold-blooded killer, because that's what has to be done. And there's never a scene where somebody's like, that's not the right thing to do. Billy doesn't spend 8 pages mourning the guy she just killed. No. She's like, well, that happened and that sucks and I feel like shit about it, but I have to keep going.
Right.
There's never this kind of moral play where you have somebody going, you should never do that, that should never be an object. It's mentioned once and dealt with, and I really appreciated that about it. I really appreciated that I never knew where to stand on this because I didn't see a lot of it coming, and which for me is like, and I don't necessarily think that I see a lot of things coming because I read a lot. And
you start to notice patterns in a lot of
exactly. And
styles.
I couldn't pick out the patterns in this. So at the end, I was like, wow, I was really impressed. I actually, and I think I told this story when Toby recommended it. I could have bought this. I had credit at a local used bookstore, and I could have bought it. And I was flipping through it, and I'm like, I don't know, man. It's like I could get this other thing. And now I'm like, I should have gotten it because I really, really like this.
Yeah, what I think that I liked the most about it was it felt fresh to me. It felt like it wasn't written by a comic writer, and not in the way that like a novelist will come to comics and like, I'm going to change the game.
It also doesn't feel 20 years old.
No, absolutely.
Modern.
Oh, well, especially since like the whole plot of the story is that the gap between rich and poor is becoming more and more extreme. Yeah, that has only become more realistic over the last 20 years. So, I felt really modern to me. I think that Tim Sale's art is very timeless. It's something that I really appreciate about it, and I love the gray. It's not a black and white book. Like, this book is grayscale.
Yeah.
I read an article one time that I think that he uses 7 or 10 colors between black and white. Like he mixes his own inks and boils them to get to different consistencies, which is crazy when you think about it, because not a lot of his books are in black and white, but he's colorblind, Tim Sale, and he never colors his own books. So and I believe he's like actual black and white colorblind, where he doesn't see color at all. And then, I could be way wrong on this, but
I'm not sure that that's actually a type of color blindness.
well, it's not like red green or red whatever colorblind.
Well, there's red green colorblind, and there's like red blue colorblind.
Yeah, I think that well, anyway, I feel like he is a lot more comfortable working in the grayscale, because if you look at books like Hulk Gray, like a lot of the backgrounds are very much like this, where there's several different shades of gray going on in the background. And
I definitely really like I'm pretty sure that this was done with a brush.
oh yeah,
absolutely.
It looks really good.
Yeah,
He also hand lettered it.
right. Well, maybe
In the early 90s, that's pretty standard.
yeah. And nowadays, you can buy the Tim Sale letter pack from Richard Starking's company,
Comicraft.
Because he has like such a distinct writing style, and I really do like the way he handwrites stuff, and I think the hand lettering is a cool touch in this book too.
Well, and he's got this great. Like,
Well, I mean, you
pulpy...
can tell. You can look at like 4 different S's, and
Yeah.
they are actually different.
Yeah,
I love the thing that I love about Tim Sale's artwork, and you see it a lot. I mean, it's what makes for me Long Halloween and Dark Victory so powerful. Is he's got this great like pulpy art style that's really kind of like, and especially in Billi 99, it's this great like kind of blending of this very almost. It's a very noir setting with this very kind of pulpy story that has this very kind of modern plot. And I really like the way that could have gone wrong at any one of a number of places. And it doesn't. Like, I never feel like it jumps the shark.
yeah.
I do want to throw out that even though I had mixed feelings about a lot of the art, there was some stuff I really liked, like this splash page on pages 8 and 9 of the first issue.
Yeah.
It's just really incredible. Like the interplay of light and dark.
Yeah, his
is
use
really,
of
For
really
those
cool.
of you who don't know, it's a picture of the cityscape.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like one of the few splash pages in the book that's like the 2-page spread, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah.
And it really is.
There's
It's-
only a few of them.
Yeah, they really use sparingly. This book reminds me so much of like a Kubrick movie.
Yeah.
I think it's really got that Kubrick. Like I could definitely see Kubrick directing something like this.
It is very cinematic. There's lots of great panels that are just like close-ups on people's faces or
And then,
eyes or
like-
whatever, and then establishing shots, and later
Yeah.
we're all basically holding up panels of what we think is cool
Yeah,
right
no,
now,
there's so much
which is
just
so
like-
helpful in an audio show. But no,
Look at it! Look at it!
I love the just like there's just an establishing shot of a building, and then it'll move to the interior, and his use of silhouette on a character, in the foreground, or in the backgrounds you can't really tell what some of the characters are. I think it's just I have always been a huge fan of Tim Sale's art.
Just for reference, I'm holding up a panel on page 31 of Billy
Yeah.
standing in an alleyway where she's like half silhouetted.
Yeah, and there's just such great panels with no dialogue, which makes it feel cinematic to me. Like page 95 is just, the woman that we were talking about earlier, Karen, the neighbor, like standing there about to be picked up, basically, to be to do her prostitute work. And it's just these like you can see the lines that are the rain, and it's just the sadness in her face is it's just very cinematic. Like all of the panels are really well thought out, I think. And I've always loved Tim Sale's art for that.
Yeah, I really like it.
It's what makes all of the Batman books that he's worked on like so powerful to me. Is the art for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked the story because it felt more realistic and a lot fresher than a lot of superhero stuff. It's what I love indie comics for. It's just I think that if you like indie comics and you like superheroes and you want a good middle ground, I think this is definitely a worth read.
I can't argue with that. I'm glad that I read it once. I'm not sure that it's something that I'm going to want to read again.
Yeah.
But I would recommend it to other people to read at least once.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I know that I would flip through it just for the art. You know, I know what happens in the story, and so that takes a little bit of the romance out of reading it again. Is, you know, a lot of this story is figuring out what's going to happen to these characters that you care about, because they are very real characters.
Absolutely.
But I would definitely flip through it again for the art. I mean, even now I'm just flipping pages and it's, you know, they just hit you.
Yeah.
It's really strong.
The layout is almost perfect.
Yeah.
There's really not a lot that, you know, usually I have some, I feel like I have niggling problems with some things, just something at the back of my head, but this really came out of left field. You know, I kind of didn't know how I would feel about it, and I really liked it. There are elements of a lot of stuff I like in there. I feel like there are Batman elements, there's Zorro elements, I feel like there's kind of there's like elements of like The Godfather in there a little bit, and, you know, a bunch of stuff that I really, really liked. So
yeah, and I think that as, like, we often talk about, you know, oh, it's a set in the near future story.
Yeah, speculative fiction.
Yeah, this is set in the near future, and there's no mention of technology, like, whatsoever. Like, no one ever uses a computer and, like, loads a CD or, like, a data disc or a tape or something.
I've always been really interested in retro futures.
Yeah.
Because every decade has its own vision of the future.
Right.
Like things that they never saw coming. Like the original Star Trek is very much the future of the 1960s.
Right. Well, and you look at like the Jetsons and like those kind of like future 50s future like flying car
like
type
the
stuff.
The future of the 60s isn't the same as the future of the 70s or the future of the 80s.
Yeah.
And I really like, because I mean this is kind of the future of the 90s, but it's almost the future that we're living in.
Yeah.
And like those high science things aren't really an element of the story because it's not a science fiction story.
Yeah.
But it's still got this weird retro future vibe to it that I kind of liked.
It's always funny when
I kind of felt like the title was actually an allusion to that, because it was written in 1991, and it's saying that World War III happened and nobody noticed, and the title is Billi 99.
Yeah.
So this could be what.
Yeah, it hasn't been that long since it was, you know, like it's not that far in the future. It's like 8 years in the future of that.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I really like I don't know if it was a conscious effort or what, but to not show how the technology works, because it's always funny when you watch a science fiction movie and they're like, quick, put the VCR together so we can watch the, you know, like they're in the future, but they're using super
Star
outdated
Trek, they're
technology.
like, go pull this tape into your memory banks. What?
You know, there's just so many things that we would have thought of. You know, Star Wars is very much a future where engineering technology takes off, you know, because they are able to build giant starships in the Death Star or whatever. But they're communicating.
And they're able to build them in space.
Star,
yeah.
That was totally in Star Trek.
But I said Star Wars.
Oh.
But their communication,
Star Wars.
Their communications technology is like so outdated. They're like, you know, using ship to ship radio, and they have like, there's no memory in the Millennium Falcon or anything. It's just like it's very like, you know, retro future.
Well, it's really funny because in the first Star Wars movies, Han Solo is like, I have to make the calculations to go to hyperspace, and he goes to a different console.
Yeah.
It's like, what is he back there with a fucking slide
He's got
ruler?
an abacus over there, and he's like.
And then in the second movie, they're like, oh, the computer's calculating our hyperspace jump. It's like, wow, that's the difference between 1977 and 1981.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought that it was a thing. Don't think it upgrades somewhere along the line.
Well, in the second movie, they're like repairing the ship.
Yeah,
in the beginning.
they're like on the hot base, and Chewbacca's
I always thought it
working
was
on it. Like, I'm sure they put
the-
upgrades in it, but it's really funny when you contrast it, especially to the prequels, when like all the technology is so much better.
Oh yeah,
because that's the future of 1999, 2001.
Right.
Like,
and
and also the idiocy of George Lucas.
Sure.
But
I do love that in an episode, or like an interview with Harrison Ford, they're talking about when he first climbed into the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and he's like, how do you drive this ship? You know, like there's no steering wheel or joystick or anything, and they're just like, we'll just push a lot of buttons. And when you go back and watch it now, they're just like flipping switches on the ceiling, and you're like, how is he making the ship go left? Because like, what is he doing that drives the ship? You know, so
there was
he's configuring the repulsors too.
Oh, yeah.
No way. I mean, there's no way the Millennium Falcon works in space. It's just got one giant booster on the back. That's not how space works.
Yeah.
There's no air to change you need a rocket to
there was
push
an interview with Alan Tudyk from Firefly. He played the pilot, Wash.
Yeah.
And he's like, there were just all these buttons and switches on the set, and they didn't tell me to do anything. So I was like, okay, I'm going to hit this like sequence of switches and buttons, and that's like my magic make things happen sequence. And like if you watch the show, like he always does that first before he does anything else.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's like he's signing into the computer.
Basically, yeah. It's like, I'm just going to do this thing, and it looks really cool.
You got
Yeah.
mail.
Also, side note, he will be at Emerald City Comic Con this year.
He will be.
As will we.
And God.
You're not going to stand in line to meet him, are you?
No, because I'm sure that he'll have a look similar to the one that Jonan Vasquez and what's his face fucking had.
Andrew Hussey?
Yeah. They just have this kind of. I mean, I'm sure Alan
shell-shocked.
Tudyk is more used to it because of Firefly, because of
Well, he's an actor.
he's
Yeah.
an actor, but like. There's just a certain type of fan that just takes it out of you because they don't know. Last year, we went and saw Richard Horvitz and the guy, Ricky Sim or something, the guy that does Invader Zim and Gurr. And there were people that got up in the audience to talk to them, and I was embarrassed for them. They were so awkward, and they were talking to them like they were like addressing him as Zim, and I'm like, that's make-believe.
Yeah.
Like, that's make-believe, right? And the great thing is when you watch somebody that's used to that handle somebody like that, because they're totally dismissive. They're just like, so, he would just do his Zim voice and be like, fuck off, or whatever. And it was great, but I feel bad for Alan Tudyk, because I'm sure he's going to get a lot of that.
Well, sure. I'm sure he's used to it. He's been to San Diego Comic-Con.
That's true, it's true.
I mean, the lines for those kind of things
are ridiculous.
I would never wait.
I got to take my kiddo to see somebody in there. But no, I was going to stand in line to see Richard Dean Anderson because he's MacGyver, and then I saw what he looks like now, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just remember him with that fucking gorgeous mane of hair.
So majestic.
He is, yeah. That's how I want to remember him.
Who's the voice of Bender? John DiMaggio?
Yeah.
He was there, I guess,
a couple years ago,
and I guess he was just awesome to everybody. So
yeah,
there are guys that handle that kind of stuff really well.
He is cool because me and Kirby, my girlfriend, waited in line to get our Futurama poster signed by Billy West, and Kirby was freaking out, and she managed to go, can you get John DiMaggio to sign it too? And fucking Billy West started yelling over to him, going, hey Johnny, come sign this. And they did this whole little thing right there. It was really, they were both awesome. Awesome.
So I mean, it's
they're
worth
both veteran voices.
Oh yeah, they've been doing it forever.
Yeah, it's worth meeting people like that, but I can't even stand in line at
I just mean, like, when it comes to voice actors, like, there's such a small community, and there's a few of them.
No, there's only 12 of them
who have been doing it for like years and years and years, and it's like every single TV show you watch, it's like, and additional voices, this guy, because they can do like 100 different voices, and like
Mark
they
Hamill.
know each other.
Frank Welker,
Tara Strong.
It'll be interesting.
I think meeting Alan Tudyk would be cool though.
I wouldn't mind. I would just want to go up to him and just be like, you got shafted.
Loved you in Dollhouse.
Yeah.
Actually,
literally and figuratively.
Have you seen all of Dollhouse?
Yes.
You're like the only person I've ever talked to who has actually watched that show long enough to get to the part that Alan Tudyk is in.
No, there are a lot of women I know that really, really like Dollhouse and always try to get me to watch it.
It was incredible, and I think Alan Tudyk, you watch him on that show and just imagine that he's the Joker.
I made it 2 episodes in before I was like, I've had enough of this.
It gets really good. You gotta go to episode 6, because episode 6 is where it starts to get really good.
I feel this way about anytime somebody says that to me, I'm like, no, I don't have to.
I mean, so you're telling me I have to invest 6 hours of my life to get to something that's worth watching.
I can't just come in it bugs the shit out of me. I have to watch from the Torchwood.
Well, no,
people did that with me at Torchwood.
You can't.
It gets a lot better after the first season. Yeah, but the first season is like 15 episodes, and they all fucking suck.
It's
not like Parks and Rec where you have to get through fucking 2 hours. And then in season 2, it starts to get really good.
Yeah, I mean, there's
lots
of shows where you have to do that with, and I realize that for TV shows, I'm way less forgiving than that. Like, I'll read hundreds of issues of a comic book to get to the good part. I'm like, I just want to know what happens before everybody says, and I'm reading
through a bad
bullshit
part.
and bull after bull. But I think it's because I can read it at my own pace.
Yeah,
and like I can just kind of be like, all right, okay, this is stupid. Keep reading. But TV demands that you just wait for things to happen, and I have the worst amount of patience.
And I would never expect somebody who's like having a bad time like to sit through something they don't like to potentially get to something they do.
I can't.
I just have to say that I have respect for people like Cade who have sat through the crap and know how crappy it is to get to the good part, and therefore appreciate how good the good part is.
You are talking
because
to the
most
guy
people
who's
haven't watched all of Dollhouse, and then they don't know how good it got.
Yeah, you are talking to the guy though that watched 10 seasons of Smallville. So
Guilty pleasure, man.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I don't
know.
admit in public the terrible, terrible shows that I've watched.
I'm not being like,
Way too
I'm
much
on my high horse. I've never watched a shitty
I
show
don't
because
have
they
a show-
definitely
I mean, I don't really have
but
music like that, but I'm trying to think if I have a show like that, and I don't really think.
Xena Warrior Princess, that's fine.
No,
There's nothing wrong with Xena Warrior
Nothing,
Princess.
I love it.
Until
I
you get
couldn't-
to, I want to say season 4.
I mean, I was a kid when I watched
that's
it.
a shot in the dark. I just remember the beginning was good, and then at a certain point, like they went off to Asia, and Xena was like an angel or something.
I don't
Like, it
remember
got
any of this.
really weird later on.
Okay, so
I just
maybe
remember,
I don't remember.
flying discs and her blonde friend. That's
Yeah, right. I never watched any of that action-packed stuff.
I
I've tried to
think
go back
that
and
was
watch it.
probably the first show that I ever watched that had an incredibly hardcore shipping crowd.
I
Yeah,
think
right.
the only
Yeah, that did.
Xena stuff I watched was the crossover stuff with Kevin Sorbo
Yeah.
as Hercules.
The only Hercules I watched was the ones with Bruce Campbell on as the dude, the duder.
I want to say Autolycles, the King of Thieves.
Something like that. I don't know.
Did you read the comment? Oh, so we're way
I
off
thought of
topic now,
something.
but
Burn Notice. I've seen almost all of Burn Notice, and that show
okay.
is fucking awful.
There you
and
go.
I don't care. I love
okay,
it.
back to Bruce Campbell though. Did you read the comic that was the crossover between Xena, Hercules, and Army of Darkness?
No, I
Because-
I
read the
did read the
Marvels.
crossover between Army of Darkness and Marvel Zombies.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that
which
was
was-
terrible. And I swore I would never read an Army of Darkness
The
crossover
only reason
again.
why I didn't read this, but the only reason I want to read that is because Bruce Campbell is 2 characters in that. Because he is the guy from Hercules
Yeah, and he's also
Ash.
Ash, yeah.
So I would have loved to have seen that on television. But
Well,
that's
that
the
just
reason.
means that they need to do Crisis on Infinite Bruce Campbell's
Bruce
and bring in
Campbell's.
the character that he played on whatever the one was where he was a sailboat captain.
You'd have to
I don't
do.
know. What
You'd
is
have
that
to do
one?
his
It
character
was set
from
in like
Burn
the
Notice.
age of
Yeah,
sailing. It was like
yeah,
a
yeah.
pirate captain or something like that.
how am I
I
not?
was
Wait,
gonna say, how do I not know
You're
about
talking
this?
about. It was right
was
around
after
No, he
Xena
wasn't a
and
pirate.
Hercules
He was a
were over.
spy, like a revolutionary spy, and it was called Jack of All Trades.
That's it.
And also Briscoe County, because
Yes.
Briscoe County Jr.
Well, that's
and
how you
it
tie
would
it all
have
together.
to be narrated by Michael Weston.
it would have to be. I think
There are 3
my idea-
things you need to know when you're fighting multiple Bruce
I
Campbells.
told you about this idea I have that you should just have Michael Weston from Burn Notice narrating all kinds of things, and you could just be like you could have narrating a cooking show and be like, when making a souffle, it's very important to keep in mind 3 things. Use the freshest produce you can. Just like, because that's the best part of that show is when he's like, I'm going to explain to you the plot step by step.
And there's
you
always
won't even
3
need to-
steps?
there's usually more. I just 3 is a convenient
So,
number.
Matt, what did you think about Billy 99?
Matt is here. It's amazing. You
Yeah.
heard him in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys pretty much hit the major points for me. I really, really love the concept of it. I felt like there was some stuff that maybe could have been fleshed out a little bit better. I'm not going to lie. It might have been that I was reading when I was really tired, but I had to go back and read it again to get some of it. So that, I mean, and that could have been my
definitely
lazy
doesn't.
reading, so I'm not going to complain about that really, but...
Well, it doesn't spoon feed you anything. Like
Yeah.
you really have to kind of pay attention to a lot of what seems like inane dialogue.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I said, I'm not going to complain about it
Yeah.
because actually thinking about it a little bit more, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
And the art was definitely amazing, and
Yeah.
I agree it was a little inconsistent at times. There were certain panels where it was hard for me to kind of understand what was going on, and I'd have to go back and kind of go through it again.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much of that was the writing and how much of that was Tim Sale. I mean,
It could be a mix of both.
and and it could have been both. You know,
I also saw somebody saying that the main villain guy and the boyfriend were drawn in a really similar way.
Yeah.
Where it's easy to become confused between the two of them, especially the like when the first time that the boyfriend shows up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
when
think
he's
his
in the
hairstyle
limo.
kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, their faces are similar.
Yeah, they
but
both
the
got these
hairs-
like long, angular faces.
Yeah, I guess I can see that.
And, I mean, I read that
They have
before
the
I
same
read
hairline too. now that
the
I'm
comic,
seeing
so
it.
I was watching out for it.
yeah.
Their noses are very different, and the boyfriend has an earring too. So it's
Yes.
like there's like little subtle things, but it doesn't suffer from same face like some artists
Yeah,
where like
yeah.
everybody looks the same. Because one of the things I really like about it is how different some of the characters look. Like the old guys look old,
Yeah.
and the young
Yeah.
people look young, and that's something you don't see a lot in comic books. So
I feel like I've said this before, but I wish that this had been done now in the environment that we have for indie books today.
Yes.
I feel like I was saying this about Scud.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like, I really like the concepts here, but it's kind of rough because indie comics in the 90s were still really low budget.
oh yeah.
And I would have loved to see the care and attention that this would have gotten in today's market.
Well, something that I'm not sure, like, we don't know a lot about how this came out. I mean, did it have editorial support from the beginning, or did they just hand it to Dark Horse finished? Like,
know.
there's a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
we don't know about how a lot of indie comics worked back then. Because sometimes it was like Scud, where, he's doing it all himself. It's finished, and he's handing it to a company to publish,
Well, I mean, in the case of Scud, he wasn't even handing it to a company to publish. He was just publishing it.
Well, but his own company, but eventually someone else took over
Right.
publishing those as trades, so
Yeah.
even though Dark Horse was publishing those eventually, like, they had no editorial decision making in the early processes of that book.
And we really
this-
don't know because there was no transparency with the companies back then,
Oh, yeah.
as there is today with all the Twitter and the
Yeah, that's
showing
true.
you how it's done and all that shit.
And did this came out as 4 issues
I believe
separately,
so,
right?
yeah.
4 oversized issues.
And were those issues published by Dark Horse?
I
or-
think
believe
that they
so,
were.
Okay.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they absolutely were, because at the end it says specifically originally published by blah 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 blah.
One thing too that we didn't really talk about is I love the city itself.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely the Cordon is in and of itself a big part of
Yeah, it
the
says,
story.
this volume collects issues 1 through 4 of the Dark Horse comic book series, Billy 99.
Okay, cool.
One more thing I wanted to mention is I really loved Don Quixote as a character in this.
Oh, yeah.
the wizard dude.
Yeah, he's a really interesting dude.
I really like the design around him. I was actually just flipping through the book to get to the end, and there's one page, and now I'm not going to be able to find it again, but it's him in his workshop, and he looks like a freaking wizard. It's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just surrounded by all these arcane
with
implements.
the 2 kids sleeping on the
in the background.
Yeah. No, that panel really struck me. And I just thought it was amazing the way they worked Don Quixote as this, astral projecting kind of like background superhero that does things in the shadows, because, like, I just think that's a really cool way to go with the character. I mean,
yeah.
especially having read the book when I was in high school, and you could kind of, a lot of people say that he's crazy, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea of the book was he is crazy. But I've always thought of the idea is really interesting when you think about, like, well, what if he isn't?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's what makes those kind of characters that are, like, quote-unquote, magical or see things that other characters don't see.
Yeah.
I think those characters are always really interesting because everyone can easily dismiss him and be like, oh, he's just this nuts old man.
But there's a reason.
But there is also just this abstract possibility that he totally is right. I've always loved those kind of narratives that thread the line of, like, what's real and what's not, and
The page I'm referring to is on 103, by the way.
Yeah.
And, like, he's got, like, a protractor and scrolls and, like, test tubes and this weird lantern hanging down, and there's a candle, and he's, like, poring over this giant book. It's a really cool page.
Yeah.
A tome, if you will.
Oh, well, you can't. It's from the side, so you can't tell if it's a tome.
Also, side note, there's page numbers in this.
Oh,
Yes,
again.
is
Which I
awesome.
love.
Oh my god!
I know it's such a menial thing, but every time it's there, I'm gonna say something about it
It's
because I
so
love it.
good.
And
Especially for us who are, like,
God,
want to
yeah, so you
share
can tell-
with,
yeah.
other people. But
It's so nice.
even still, it's just, I love having page numbers and stuff.
I agree with you. I think one of the things that was done really well in this was the city as a character, and there's a scene where Billi is kind of, it's the wrought iron superstructure or like substructure of the building that she's climbing down in the beginning.
Oh yeah, how she gets between the kind of rich portion of the city and the Cordon
into the Cordon,
climbing up these girders and then kind of ziplining down.
She's hanging on. She's like up there talking about how it's her place.
Yeah,
and
very Batman-like.
It is very Batman-like, and you have all these, like, on 161 and a few others, you have these very narrow panels of just the city and these brick buildings where each individual brick has been drawn, which must have taken forever. You know, I mean, this is... And I want to say, this was an Eisner-nominated work. Like, this was nominated for an Eisner the year it came out. So, this wasn't under the radar. Like, the original 4 series of these sold out. This was an acclaimed book.
It's funny how quickly we forget, though.
Yeah,
because nobody
totally
ever
is.
talks about this.
I was going to say...
It came out when I was like 9 years old.
Yeah, well, I mean...
I've never heard of it.
It's not surprising that we don't know about it.
I was going to say the only reason I'd ever heard of this before is because after I read The Long Halloween the first time, I immediately went and looked up everything that Tim Sale's done and kind of started checking books off that list.
Yeah.
And I remember just seeing it on the list and being like, oh, it's out of print. I'll get to it at some point.
Yeah, and it is one of his earlier works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, you know, it was easy to kind of dismiss it in my mind of like, oh, I don't know what that is. I'll read that later. But,
yeah, and I think...
but when you talk about, like, great indie works or great, you know, superhero stories and stuff, this book almost never comes up, and I think that it deserves to be mentioned more.
Absolutely.
Like,
I agree.
I'm
Especially
glad that I read it.
the way that things are today.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is an important thing to read.
Well, and also, it still feels fresh. It feels like it's not a cookie cutter book. Like, this doesn't feel like, oh, this is just drawing really heavily on Frank Miller's idea of like a shitty dystopian. Like, this feels like I feel a lot of the author coming through in this book, and I feel like the character of Billi, you know, as a strong female character she's just really interesting, you know, more than she is like a crazy strong character, because she does a lot of things wrong.
Yeah, she's flawed.
She's very flawed, but she's incredibly real and an incredibly fascinating female character. And in a medium where there aren't enough of those, I think that she's definitely worth mention.
I mean, what makes her special isn't her skills as the Sword of Toleado or her money or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's her drive.
Yeah, and her empathy. Like, she really cares about people.
Her compassion and her empathy. And we kind of talked about it, but the other thing that I really liked is, I mean, Billy's obviously the hero of the story, but everyone there is a little bit good and a little bit bad. Like, I mean, she kills people, and we said that, but it's great that there's no one wholly good character.
Well, and I think this is what Joe was talking about earlier, where this isn't your black and white superhero story where things are always good and things are always bad. Like, the guy that I relate with the most, actually, in this book is Billy's boyfriend or love interest.
his name is Anastasio.
It's Randy. I think she calls him Randy at one point.
No, it's not. Her boyfriend is
Annunzio, was it?
And that's his last name.
I can say that because I'm Italian.
Right? It's like Mr. Annunzio, right? That's what
Annunzio
I read. That
is his last name. Hold on, it's
anyway.
on the second to last page.
Anyway, he does heroic things, but he does them by killing people. Like, they're the ends, you know, in his mind, the ends justify the means, and they are essentially like Billy's vehicle back into her company. But to do that,
I guess it is Annunzio.
He's killing people, and in a superhero book, that would be very frowned upon. I feel like that would, you know, for a lot of characters.
His name is Annunzio. That's his name.
And I like that. I like that he's able to kill people. I mean, he poisons a guy.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
And it is such a great scene because he walks by and he. The chef
that
is
guy
like,
needed poisoning.
Yeah.
He's an evil motherfucker.
Oh yeah, and the chef is like, "Oh, stop with the garnish. Get those soups out." And you're like, "Why is who's garnishing the soup?" And then he serves it to the guy, and he's mid like evil speech basically, and just dies. And then it's Annunzio walking out, and he's like, "He never looked up once." Like, he would have just recognized... I mean, it's just the balls to kill that guy.
Well, I think the brilliance in the character is that he's not helping her because she can't do it herself. He's helping her because she needs time and he can give it to her.
Well, and also, he does the only thing that he really knows how to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he does what he can. And maybe it's... If he had told her, she would have tried to stop him. And because, you know, she's not for that kind of world. But... You know, he just does it because it's what he knows how to do, and he's like, "Look, this is the help I can give her, even if she doesn't want it. I'm gonna do it." And I really liked that character, and I liked their relationship. I thought it was just like, it wasn't trite and it wasn't
tropey.
It wasn't overplayed, and there was no like big romance story like, will they be together in the end? Like, none of it really matters.
Yeah.
I guess I just like protagonists to succeed or fail based on like their own effort.
Yeah,
like if she was going to win, it should be because of something that she did, not because a side character went, okay, well, I'm going to push the win button.
Right, which was totally my complaint with Supermarket. Was absolutely my complaint with that. It was like, I wish that it had been her plan that she won, right? And so like I have that same feeling in this book. But at the end of the day, it's like sometimes the stories aren't, you know, that doesn't happen. You know, sometimes the protagonist can't win.
Yeah,
and someone else has to come in and save. And Joe saying earlier, like, no Deus Ex Machina comes in, but they kind of do. Like, these other players are kind of doing more for the world than she is.
It's a realistic story, but it's not narratively satisfying, I guess.
Well, and I think that it feels like that was kind of the purpose, though, because that fits kind of at least in my mind, that fits the message of the story.
Well, and it's realistic, too. Sometimes one person can't solve all the problems.
I don't know if I would actually consider that Deus Ex Machina, though, because he did build up to it.
No, I don't.
And it was, it was part of his story to do that.
Yeah, I don't think that it was Deus Ex Machina, but it definitely is. The protagonist doesn't solve. The world kind of solves the problem for her.
Can we say Deus Ex Machina again?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say it again.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I would have felt really... And the funny thing is that... It's not a funny thing. This is what always happens. I feel exactly the opposite. I feel if Billi had pulled it off and done it by herself, I would have been tremendously unsatisfied.
Well, it would have felt more traditional.
And I think it would have broken from the rest of the story.
The way that it did it here, it felt much more realistic and...
Well, the message is about
things
helping
falling
each other.
into play. Yeah,
the message is about reaching out to people and working together.
And things falling into place from a lot of different outside sources. People with their own agendas.
Well, the whole story, she's helping other people,
right?
Absolutely.
And then at the end, she can't do it on her own, and she has to essentially have help from someone else.
Yeah,
and to me, that's part of the story coming full circle.
I think sometimes it's really interesting in a story when you don't get the ending that you wanted. Like, you don't get the happy ending that you want. That sometimes
I think it
you get the
challenges
ending
you to go back and look at the rest of the story.
And I think that my prime example that I always use, and I just rewatched this recently, so I don't know how great of an example it is anymore, but is Princess Mononoke. You definitely don't get the ending you wanted in that book. It's not a very triumphant ending. Like, shit just kind of happens, and it's like, oh, well, I guess we did okay enough. That
it's like, what's going to happen now?
Like,
I don't know. Maybe we'll work it out.
Right, yeah, and I think that sometimes that's really great because it doesn't happen very often.
It may be that I'm being overly sensitive to the gender politics of the situation, and that may have colored my view, but I felt dissatisfied.
I guess I also feel like this is a very gender positive book, and also a very positive book in terms of depicting people of all like ethnicities really well.
I definitely agree with that,
because
I mean 99% of the book is really good in that regard.
Yeah, I think that it handles characters much better than a lot of the other stuff I've read. So if at one point it does kind of feel like, oh, the female hero needs the help of a male character to succeed, maybe, but she needs the help of a lot of characters to succeed.
Right, and like I said, this is probably just me being oversensitive.
Yeah, I never feel like she loses her agency, which was for me is the red flag I always look for. Like, nobody comes up to her and says, "You can't do this by yourself. You need my help, so sit down," or
and
something like that, which is, I think...
She exhausts every option before that. Like, no one comes in and saves the day before she has a chance to try to save it herself. She tries, like, several different ways to succeed, fails at all of them.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, everyone else is like, look, we are going to help you because we care about you.
I feel it's more akin to... I feel like a lot of times when this is done, when you have that female character and the man steps up, it's always traditionally a man, and he's always like, this is the hard part, so sit this out, I'll take care of it for you. And I feel like Billi is running headlong towards this locked door for the entire thing, and what Annunzio does for her is he just opens that door for her.
Yeah.
But everything she meets up until she gets to that door, she's handling. And she's got a mixed track record.
Well, and if you look at his motivation, I mean, his motivation isn't she can't do it and I need to do it.
Right.
His motivation is that he cares about her.
Yeah.
And he's doing it because of his feelings for her. And that I mean, to an extent, and I feel like that speaks to her strength and character.
Well, and I think that
for him to care about her that way.
What makes that really hit home for me is the last page when you find out that Annunzio's not dead, and that
he doesn't go back for her.
He leaves her, and the way the hostess or whoever is serving him on the plane is like, she must have been a special lady, and he's like, she was. Like he basically gave up his whole life for her.
Yeah.
And not in like a committing suicide way, but he's gonna have to live the rest of his life without her. And I mean, so is she, but like he got to make the choice, and like
it's totally a Godfather thing. When,
it's shitty, like I can't imagine doing that in that situation, and that's death would have been the easier way out there probably, but I think it makes him a really interesting character.
Well, you don't know where he's going to.
I know exactly where he's going. He's going home.
But that's what I mean. Like you don't know what kind of life he's going to.
No, I don't.
Maybe he's going to a really.
Exactly.
But any
he's
life
going to Italy. He's going to hang out with Fabrizio. Then he's going to meet what's her face, and Fabrizio's going to blow her up in the car.
But
I've seen this movie before.
The sad thing to me is though,
Abalone.
I know what he's going to.
Abalone, that's her name.
Abalone?
Abalone.
Definitely.
It's abalone.
It's abalone.
But I do know what kind of life he's going to. He's going into a life without her. And like that in and of itself is like less good than if he had stayed,
Yeah.
So it is kind of that like martyrdom sacrifice story at the end, but I don't know, I really like the motivations of a lot of these characters, and I think they're very well rounded for comic book characters. I think that's a huge positive mark towards this book.
It totally is.
It wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't find something to complain.
No,
that's right.
That's true. Although sometimes I think you look too hard.
And
I'm going to be honest, your shtick is getting a little old. Just saying.
Hey,
45 episodes.
You guys switch roles every once in a while, and that keeps it fresh.
I know, it does. So, but I think we're going to be on the same page. The next thing we're doing is our long run on Ultimate Spider-Man, and I have this feeling like it's going to be another it's going to be another us against you.
That will be out before
this one does.
Yeah,
from the future.
You'll have already heard the long run before you hear this.
Yeah, exactly. So this will be really confusing, and you'll wonder why we even brought it up.
So go back in time and finish reading Ultimate Spider-Man before you listen to the episode before
whatever
this one.
you do, don't listen to this one after you listen to Ultimate Spider-Man.
No,
whatever you do.
That's how it's gonna.
That's the joke.
It's gonna cause a tear in the space.
I just did.
I feel like maybe it's time for recommendations.
Yes.
My recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kate, do you want to go first, Kate?
I would love to go first.
All right, Kate, recommend something for me.
Okay, so my book this week is a book that's been recommended before, but we did not pick it, even though I voted for it.
Bitter much or anything.
Well, I know you're not voting for it this time.
No, that's very true. I chose Mark Waid's Daredevil, the new one that just came out, kind of like a refreshing eye on the character.
Yeah. It's not quite a Marvel Now title.
Yeah, it's pre-Marvel Now, and actually they just announced that they're gonna
relaunched it as a Marvel Now title on like issue 13 or something like that.
So
because that was then a thing, and they didn't like start numbering it again or change anything up, but it was like it's Marvel Now.
Right,
and now they're relaunching it as a new number one with the same creative team.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes no fucking sense to me.
Well,
Okay,
because
I was confused about that.
They've finished this meta arc or whatever, and they're moving on to the next meta arc. Is what the interviewer said.
Too many number ones.
Numbering a comic book has always just aggravated me in general.
It is. I agree.
But yeah, Mark Waid, Daredevil.
Kate,
Very
do you
cool.
want to tell us why you really like the series? I know why I like it, but I want to know why you
I actually haven't read past the second issue, but I really want to.
But that first
The
issue
truth
is
comes out.
Cade is putting it on here because he's a really sweet man and he really wants Audrey to get on the podcast. And Audrey has read it.
That too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a book that we can get Joe's daughter on the podcast for. It's a book that I've heard lovely
Can't wait
things
for that.
about from, I think, almost everybody here at the table.
Yeah.
Has told me good things
I
about
think
it.
we've all read it.
Yeah.
We all really
It's
like
really
it.
good.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And
you
if
haven't
it's
read it,
that
you should,
good,
regardless
we
of
should
whether we
probably
pick it or
talk
not.
about it.
Yeah. If you haven't read it, you should feel bad about yourself. For not
It's
reading
it's a reinvigoration of the character.
Especially if you've... I think that this book is the strongest for someone who has never read Daredevil
Oh,
before.
yeah.
And that's
Ever.
actually where I came into it.
Me
I
too.
had never read Daredevil before. I read this, and then I went back and read Frank Miller's.
I
Daredevil.
had
I feel
read
like it's a-
snippets of Daredevil. Like I
Yeah.
read Kevin Smith's and I read some of Ben, and I just I didn't get it. I didn't understand why Daredevil was cool.
I
I've
knew
always loved
that Daredevil was a character, but I'd never read his book before.
Yeah.
So
As
I
somebody
really enjoyed it.
who has been reading Daredevil since the 90s and read the whole, my first Daredevil book was the Man Without Fear miniseries, which was Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.
We've read all the Innocenti.
And I've read some of the Innocenti, but I've read all of Frank Miller's stuff. I've read the Bendis run. I've read the Brubaker run. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. My favorite part of this run is in the beginning. He's talking to Foggy Nelson. He's like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, I've been in a dark place lately, and I'm done with all that.
Yeah.
And with just a wave of the hand, he dismisses, the last 10 years of Daredevil, which is good, but it's Bendis and Brubaker trying to rewrite Frank Miller's Daredevil,
Well,
which we don't need.
And I think
Yeah,
that
I could not read Bendis and Brubaker's, but then again, I had a really hard time reading Frank Miller's, and I've never finished it.
I think that this book is really strong because it's great for people who've read Daredevil for a long time and also people who've never read Daredevil for a long time.
It's,
There's
it's
not a lot
all
of
around a
books.
great comic.
But if you've never read Daredevil, I would start here over anywhere else in Daredevil's
I agree
history,
completely.
I think so.
And so watch as we don't vote for it. We always say this about it, and we never vote for it.
Yeah.
All right, Chard, what do you got?
Well, I'm bringing back a redemption pick as well. It's a book that has been recommended, I think, twice before on the show, but I really like it. And I know we've been doing a lot of DC lately, and I know we have a big DC thing planned in the future, but I think that this book is awesome, and we should talk about it because it really leads into
is
the
it?
stuff that we're doing. It is The Tower of Babel. JLA Tower of
Shit.
Babel.
Another
Mark Waid.
title.
Mark Waid, who I absolutely love.
Wow, Mark Waid last
Handling-
week, 2 Mark Waid books this week.
He's a great writer, underappreciated, and I think that his handling of the JLA after Grant Morrison's
Oh, it was-
setup of the JLA, I really
can't
like.
agree with that. Mark Waid is not underappreciated. He
Yeah,
is
I
appreciated.
agree with you, too.
He is widely recognized
He
as
is-
one of
he
the
is,
great
absolutely.
comic writers of the
What's
time.
crazy to me though is there are lines at Comic-Con to see guys like Rob Liefeld who couldn't draw the shit coming out of their
Yeah, but I
ass.
feel like that was
And Mark
mostly
Waid's
ironic.
just walking around like a normal dude, and nobody
That's
knows
true.
who he is,
Mark
and no
Waid
one
has
goes.
never had a
He's
line.
Never got a line. Nobody is ever mobbing Mark Waid.
yeah.
I met him like on accident.
I was gonna
'cause
say
he's
that's
just
how I
like-
met him too. I walked by and I was like, "Shit, there's no one in line for this guy." So I just went up and I didn't even have anything for him. I was just like, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I was like, "I really like you."
Yeah, he's.
I was just like, "Your stuff's awesome," and he's
He's
like,
a-
"Thanks. Do you want me to sign something?" I was like, no, I just wanted to say what's up," and he's like, "Cool, thanks, man."
He's such a sweetheart.
Yeah,
and he's just like, I can't believe he's not
yeah.
getting mobbed at every.
Yeah.
He's written some of the greatest comic books I think that
Well, he
exist.
is-
but-
We've talked
Mark-
about
Mark
some of his
Waid
greatest
is
comic
a
books that
comic
have
book
ever
writer,
existed.
comic book writer's comic book writer. And,
Yeah.
and I mean that's. I think really that if you and I'm going to say this, and I don't give a fuck who I offend. If you haven't read a Mark Waid comic book or a comic book written by Mark Waid, then you are not a comic book fan.
Whoa.
That's it. I'm saying
Harsh
it
words.
definitively.
The line in the sand has been drawn.
The man has written definitive works on Superman, on
like
Flash,
6 different definitive works.
JLA, I mean, the man is prolific. He's easy to track down his work.
Yeah.
And he's brilliant. I mean, he's got his tropes like every other writer, but
even his
you need to.
His kind of unknown stuff, like the book The Unknown, is great. I mean, like I asked him about. That's what I asked him about when I met him. Was Unknown Volume 2? I think it just come out. I was like, when are we going to see more of this? And he's like, probably never. And it was just crushing to me because that book is great.
It's hard to dislike Mark Waid.
I agree.
But I think that he also is a great writer, a great comic book writer, and I think underappreciated because what he does for each era of comic books is examine what's happening in the time, break it down by doing Elseworld stories like Kingdoms Come, like Empire, and he's doing it again now. He did it with Birthright, and he's doing it again now with Irredeemable and Incorruptible.
Yeah.
And I just think that he is always at the forefront of like questioning why we love comic books and why superheroes are important. And I think that that's amazing. And I think that the fact that he's been able to do that 5, 6, 7 different times shows you like what a brilliant man he is and how he can examine something from all angles. He thinks about superheroes a lot.
Yeah.
The JLA book Tower,
And he likes superheroes.
And he
you
does.
can tell that.
Yeah,
no,
it comes from a place where he's not saying this is broken, and I want to show you why. It's coming from a place of saying I love these characters, and I want to know why I love them, and I want to love them more.
He's taking them apart to play with them in fun and new, interesting ways.
Absolutely.
And I think that Tower of Babel is an amazing JLA book. It talks about all of the strength of the League and all of its weaknesses at the same time.
And it does some very interesting things.
And it also, people often will credit Identity Crisis with the like darkening and crushing of the DCU at that time. But for me, it kind of starts in Tower of Babel because he basically is breaking the League. He's doing a Batman Nightfall, but
I don't
the whole
necessarily
League,
know that his plan was what would eventually happen.
No. You read what comes after, like books, trades 8, 9, and 10 of the League, and he's playing with different elements of the League in there. But,
now, when did this one come out? Was it before the 2006 relaunch?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
This was back in the 90s.
Maybe early 2000s.
This is off of Grant Morrison's run, isn't it?
Yeah. So the trade paperback number 1 of JLA basically came out in 93 or 94. No, sorry, 96.
97.
You're right, 96 or 97.
This is volume 7.
So I would say early 2000s, late 90s.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think early
99,
2000s.
2000,
Yeah.
2001, somewhere in there.
That's
Somewhere
why I've
in
never
there.
read it.
Yeah, and it's I think it's one of my favorite Batman stories. It's also one of my favorite Justice League stories. It's just
one of my favorite. Well, I can't say that. I'll give it away.
it's just such a great DC book. It belongs in the pantheon of like great DC stories about the Justice League.
Absolutely.
And when people come into the store and they're like, I like Batman and I've read Superman, but I have never read any Justice League, what should I read? That was like almost always the first book I handed them. It was like that or New Frontier, depending on like what kind of stuff they liked from those characters. Because those are probably my 2 favorite Justice League books. So I think Tower of Babel was awesome. It's been recommended on here a bunch. This is the 3rd recommendation. If you don't read it after this, Joe's going to come to your house.
And I'm going to yell at you.
Just real loud
just
through
shit
the windows.
that you don't even care about. I'm
Not
going to
even
tell you.
words.
about-
Also, I'm going to come and
Yeah.
eat food out of your fridge.
Yeah, we're
Me
going to
and
do
Matt are
that. We
going to
already
show up
do
at your
that.
house, and between the 2 of us, we're going to eat you out of house and home, and I'm going to scream at you the whole time.
Just
and you don't
nonsense.
Want that, all right?
Gibberish languages
It'll
he's
eventually
created.
get to that. I mean, I'll probably start with something more mundane, but eventually it'll just be me just screaming Sam Kinison-esque. In that style.
Some Bob
I'm just
Dylan.
That's all I'll be doing to you. And I'm Italian. I can do that shit all night. Like I
Yeah.
will. So
if
read
you
it.
give
Just
if
read
you
it.
give Joe a chance to talk at you forever, he's going to take it.
I will.
That's a fact.
I'll actually get tired. I've met people that are worse than me, which really frightens me. Yeah.
Listening to Joe talk is kind of like gazing into the eye of eternity.
It absolutely
Toby
is.
came over the day after I was not having a good day, and he came over like mid-afternoon, and I was like, I just unleashed on him this barrage.
It was
of
like
shit
10 minutes of just you incoherently yelling about
spewing venom about everything that I hated.
everything that had been done wrong to you.
Yeah.
It was epic.
Also, if you are reading the New 52 and you think that Justice League is real cool and you love it,
then please don't read this comic.
No, read this because I want you to be like, oh, this is why everyone hates the New 52.
Stop reading.
It used to be really good.
Yeah, stop reading crappy comics and start reading.
The Justice League used to be cool.
Good comics. And
Joe,
also,
tell us about a good comic.
Okay, I actually need to do a small introduction to this book because I was so fucking surprised that Joe even had this because it is one of my all-time favorites, and I have never met a single person who likes it.
Really?
Yes.
I like this book.
I love this book.
This is a great book.
Yeah. I've
never read it. I've actually wanted to.
The shit that I take for liking Smallville and Dollhouse is the exact same shit I took for liking this book.
Well,
Well, those are...
I feel like it got a lot of shit at the time that it probably didn't deserve. And I say that having not read it.
I brought Alias, which is Jessica Jones as a private detective. Mm-hmm. So it's by Brian Michael Bendis, and I think it's doing what he does best, which is a single character, kind of, in kind of shitty circumstances. But when most of the time I kind of feel like he's milking a situation for drama, in this, it's like, what if your favorite private eye had superpowers and could, like, when she was confronted by people that were like, go away, she was just like, oh, well, I'll just throw you out of a window instead, because that's what I can do,
Well,
and you've got appearances in here by Daredevil and Luke Cage and Captain America.
Well,
in main continuity, Jessica Jones and Luke Cage are now married with a kid.
This is before. This is
the origin of that character. Yeah. And this is cool when you were talking about what is the book? The Heroes for Hire, but just the ladies.
Daughters of the Dragon.
The cool thing about Daughters of the Dragon is it's a genre piece of genres that are fun, but set in the Marvel universe.
Absolutely.
This feels very much like that. If you like detective fiction and you like stuff like that,
which is why I brought it. Yeah, if Daughters of the Dragon is like
the
Chopsaki, like Street Fighter, Sonny Chiba type stuff, this is definitely your kind of like more Marlowe, Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler. And it's a lot of fun.
If you like books like Whiteout or Stumptown,
you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
You're gonna
or anything else by Greg Rucka.
Well, I just mean like those are two great detective stories that I can think of off the top of my head. If you liked Black Sad, I'd check it out.
Yeah, and she's not the thing I like about her is that she can hang in these circles because she does have she's got powers. So. It's fun. I actually got these. There's a very interesting story of how I got these. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and the way I found out is I basically went to a doctor. He found something on my thyroid. I got an ultrasound. They said, we found something on your thyroid, which was something I'd already known. Went to see an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, and she said, we can do nothing and keep an eye on it. If something happens, we can take it out. We can biopsy it, and if something's wrong, we can take it out. Or we can just go in there and look at it, take it out, biopsy it, and if it's cancer, take everything else out too. And I was like, well, let's just do that one. That'll save us some time. So I basically woke up from surgery, and they were like, you had cancer. And I'm like, wait a minute, where was all the emotional stuff that came in between the time when I'm diagnosed and the time I don't have it anymore? Totally got cheated out of that.
You were asleep.
I was asleep, but when I woke up,
through it,
I don't think I'll ever... There were two people in the waiting room when I woke up, which is funny because I was married at the time, but it was my mom, it was my best friend, Frank. And Frank had bought me these because I had them on hold at our local shop forever. Mm-hmm. And I had said, I really want to get these, but I never had any money. Mm-hmm. And so Frank had bought them for me along with something else, I can't remember, and given them to me. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And it made it a lot easier for me to sound like Patty and Selma from The Simpsons for the 8 months that I did after my surgery. But yeah, so I'm glad he did because I love this. I'm missing the third trade. There's three trades.
Yeah. And this was originally published as a Marvel Max book.
Yeah,
yes, it is. Max so this is a mature reader's title.
Yeah, and this is on the back of Bendis doing his independent stuff, like Jinx and Goldfish.
Which is good. Jinx is great.
Yeah, and I think that those are really cool too. So he's definitely comes from a pedigree of crime and crime
I'll
fiction
give Bendis
stuff.
this: when he writes something good, he writes something really.
Well,
When he's grounded, he writes
I think
excellently.
it's even more that just like he has passion for a project.
Absolutely.
Because you can sometimes tell when he's lost interest in a story.
or
Yeah.
he's overworked and writing 9 books a month.
Or he's
Absolutely.
beating something to death with a fish.
But when you read stuff like this and Goldfish and early Powers and like a lot of those creator-owned type books and more independent stuff and Ultimate Spider-Man, which we talked about, I think that he has a lot of passion for the project and you can see it in his writing.
Absolutely, I agree.
And you can really clearly see when he's lost interest in a book. And that to
yes.
me is his biggest fault is like
Yeah.
he got huge and he was just writing for the paycheck after a while.
I-
and it
Which
became
we
a
are
job.
going to be talking about tomorrow on the long
Well,
run.
and it happens to a lot
Last
of
week on the long run.
it happens to a lot of writers, and it worries me when guys blow up super huge. And like Matt Fraction's starting to have that right now, where I think that he's about to get to the point where he's so big
Well,
that
in his defense, he's backing off of some books,
Which is
And
great.
He's dropping Fantastic Four and FF, which he's been writing very well the last, like, I don't know how many, like for the last year, let's say.
Yeah.
I forget exactly how many issues it is. But
Yeah.
he's backing off of those because he's going to be doing Inhumanity in a
Right.
couple of months.
yeah.
So,
Well, it just-
I'm
yeah.
glad that he's not pushing himself too hard.
Oh yeah,
I
and
think-
I just like he's definitely one of those guys who now earns a big paycheck every book he puts out, and I worry that the quality of their books are going to slip. And so, as much as I love a writer to get paid well because it's all I've ever wanted, I don't feel like that's selling out. I feel like that's their dream achieved, and I'm always
But
happy
I-
when somebody makes it. I do always start to get worried because of
feel
what
like-
Bendis and what happens to Kirkman and stuff too. Is
Yeah.
sometimes you kind of lose sight of your passion in a book, and I think that Alias is definitely a book where he has
There's
tons of passion.
Absolutely.
because it was nobody was really reading this at the time it was coming out.
No, and it's sad.
it got
because it's
canceled
great.
after 26 issues.
Yeah.
In fact, 2 of the issues near the end, I think it was like 24 and 25, maybe it was 23 and 24. It was a mini arc called. It had purple in the title. I don't remember much more than that, but they were just amazing.
Yeah.
All right. What did you bring, Matt?
I brought Masks and Mobsters. It's by Joshua Williamson and Mike Henderson. It's put out in hardcover by Image, part of their Shadowline collection. It originally was a digital exclusive comic. It basically starts out where a mob enforcer kills a superhero. And there's basically a war between the remaining superheroes and the mob. Reading Billi 99 kind of reminded me of it, and that's why I decided to bring it.
This is a black and white book.
It is a black and white book, yes.
And not black and white like Billi 99, but
No.
like stark black
Yeah,
and
it's
white.
it's got a lot of elements of things I really like in it. It's a superhero story. It's a mobster story. It's kind of crime noir feel to it.
And flipping through it, I saw somebody that looked like Hellboy.
Yeah, maybe that's a thing.
I was actually trying to look at the spine right before you started pitching it, and I was like, Masks and Monsters. Didn't we read that already?
It's a lot of fun. It doesn't quite have the depth that something like Billi 99 does, but that's okay with me. Like it's the art's cool.
Yeah, I really like the art.
The story's fun, and it's a quick read. So, and the hardcover is beautiful. If you're into such things,
Yeah.
it's
rated. It's rated M for mature.
Oh.
Matt, are you old enough to be reading this?
I don't know. No! I'll have to ask my wife.
Yeah. Find out because
Ask your 2 kids if you're old enough to
I'll
read a comic book.
ask my kids if I'm old enough to.
All right, Toby, what'd you bring?
I also brought a Redemption comic, although not the one that I pitched previously. So I previously pitched Atomic Robo Volume 1. This time I am pitching Atomic Robo Volume 3.
Oh, nice.
So Volume 1 is kind of a bunch of standalone stories for
Yeah.
Atomic Robo. Volume 2 is all set during World War II. Volume 3 is one story.
Yep.
And it's basically Atomic Robo fighting this thing across a number of different time periods. And so, like, it's partially set in the 20s, and he's hanging out with Charles Fort and H.P. Lovecraft. And then it's set in the 70s, and he's hanging out with Carl Sagan, and he's still fighting this thing. Mm-hmm. And it kind of jumps back and forth through time. It's a really interesting story. It's a lot of fun. It's everything that's good about Atomic Robo.
Is this the one where he becomes the Allfather eventually?
Yeah, and he's got the arm of the Destroyer, and then he goes forward, and he has to, with his grandkids, he has like 3 granddaughters, and he has to fight.
And he beats himself with a space shark,
and then he blows up the God Bomb.
Thortonic Robo.
There is a time travel element to this story.
No,
but this came out first, so really we should be actually we should have been making those jokes in reverse.
I really like Atomic Robo, but I totally understand why Toby's pitching the 3rd volume, because the first 2 are kind of hard to get into if you're not like totally
and like you can jump right into volume 3 without knowing what's going on and just pick it up really quickly.
You can actually, in my opinion, you can do that with all the volumes of Atomic Robo, which I think is one of the great
most
strengths
recent volume, which is I think volume 5 or 6,
I think,
is playing very heavily off of the events of the previous storyline. Or actually 2 storylines, because there's there's one storyline, and then it goes to something completely different that's set in like the 50s, and then it comes back for the current storyline, which is called The Savage Sword of Dr. Dinosaur.
Oh, Dr. Dinosaur's back!
Which is picking up on themes from the previous arc 2 ago.
Oh, Dr. Dinosaur.
So that one you can't jump right into, but all the other ones you can just jump right in, pick it up, read it, and enjoy it.
They do lots of cool Atomic Robo free comic book day issues that kind of like explain what Atomic Robo is about really well. So if you want to track down one of those, if you want a primer for this book, but like Toby says, you don't really
actually you can go online, and I think the origin of Dr. Dinosaur, his first appearance, is like free on a website. Not sure whose website, but if you just search for Atomic Robo and Dr. Dinosaur, you'll probably find it. Dr. Dinosaur is a wonderful, wonderful character whom I love greatly. He's unfortunately not in this.
A webcomic?
No.
It wasn't?
Nope.
No, I don't think so.
That's so weird.
So, Atomic Robo fights a giant monster across time and hangs out with Carl Sagan, and Carl Sagan has a giant gun.
Sweet.
Sold.
Yep. All right, Matt, what do you want to read?
I want to read Alias.
All right, Joe.
I'm going to vote for... Oh, God. You guys put me in a bind again.
It's not like you're not in a bind anywhere you pick in the rotation.
How do you choose between 2 Mark Waid books?
Well, how do I choose between the Mark Waid book I really want to talk about and the Mark Waid book that could get my kid on here?
Audrey could read Atomic Robo.
I'm not voting for it.
Oh, fuck it.
Because you made me park on the other side of the block.
And I carried all the chairs.
You know,
the principle
I parked
of the thing.
right in front of the building. You guys could have gotten here like 10 minutes earlier. There was a spot right in front.
I'm going to vote for Tower of Babel just because I really want to read it. I really want to talk about it. I think it's an important work in the JLA, and I do think it laid a groundwork for a lot of the stuff that came after, even though I think a lot of it was kind of mishandled and ham-handed. I think Tower of Babel is important, and I'd like to talk about it.
All right.
Cade?
I would like it to come back to me.
Toby.
Oh, shit!
All right. I will vote for Daredevil.
Cade?
Chard?
Really? You're going to go?
Oh, man.
Voting chicken.
I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna make this the hardest on you that I can because you made me go before you. I'm actually gonna vote for Masks and Monsters because I haven't read it yet. It's the only book here I have not read.
Oh God!
I'm gonna keep bringing Atomic Robo until somebody votes for it.
We'll read it. We'll get there. I like that book. I voted for that because that's the only one here I haven't read.
Okay, so then I'm choosing between Alias and Tower of Babel, and I'm gonna go with Tower of Babel. But we need to do Alias sometime.
I will do Alias.
Actually, it's not long enough for a long run, but it might be good for we could do all 3 at some point.
Yeah,
because
well,
it isn't a very long.
I just looked, and it's 4, but
it's still only
it's 26 issues.
issues.
Scud was only 20. Was 25 or 24.
It was 24.
So we can do
the whole
that.
That was a slog.
Not that.
Yeah. I mean, Scud, but reading that whole thing in a week was a little.
Reading that in a day was a slog for me because I was like, "Oh shit, I forgot I need to reread this."
Right.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I did that whole thing from memory. I didn't read it. But
Well,
I'm reading
it had
1,000
been
different
a
things.
long time, and I don't even know that I ever had read the ending before that. So,
Well, I'm going to spoil something just to shame Joe. We're actually going to be recording the long run tomorrow, even though it's going to come out first. And Joe still has like 30 issues of Spider-Man to read.
Yeah,
I
because
have-
I can say this now. I don't give a fuck anymore. I don't care what happens to Peter Parker. I don't give a fuck what happens to his stupid aunt or stupid fucking Gwen Stacy or stupid fucking Mary Jane or the stupid fucking X-Men. I don't care. I do not care.
So if you listened to this one before Ultimate Spider-Man and you want to hear the rest of that rant that takes 2 hours,
This is what we call foreshadowing.
go
Yeah,
back
that's
and
gonna be
listen to
Post-shadowing?
I
Post-shadowing.
imagine it would
Future
be
shadowing.
hilarious if you just listened to me complain about it on the actual podcast and are getting this little reminder.
Yeah, I still have like 100 episodes of Ultimate Spider-Man to read before tomorrow. So, I mean, I've read most of them before, but
Jiminy Christmas.
I read them all weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well,
Fuck all
you know
of you.
what? You are just so much not better than us because we actually have fucking lives. That's why we didn't.
Oh,
read
that is
them.
not why I did not read them. I did
I
not
didn't
read
read
them
it because I'm lazy. I
lazy.
can't do that. I don't have a fucking life.
Yeah.
Oh
Laziness.
God!
All
I thought I
right.
could get
All
away
right.
with that.
So,
next
Tower
time.
of Babel.
JLA Tower of Babel. It's originally volume 7 of the trade paperback, so you
Yeah.
can find it. It will be reprinted in volume 5 along with other stories in the future. Kind of confusing,
It's true.
which is
But
weird.
well, just look for
but-
Tower of Babel and you'll find it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
read
will
the
definitely
issue
find it.
that comes before it because that's collected in the trade too. So
Yeah.
find the like 6-issue story that it is, and also the one right before the standalone right before. it,
What
'cause that's in
issues?
the
Do we have
trade.
issues numbers?
Of
on
course,
that?
I don't have fucking issues numbers. I'm not
Issue
prepared.
numbers. Talk for
No.
2 minutes. Talk for 2
They
minutes.
can-
I don't
they
know
can
if I
find
figure
it.
out.
You can talk for 2
It's
minutes.
Mark Waid, Tower of Babel.
How many people are honestly going to be like, let me go into my archives and find those individual issues?
Dude, these are comic book fans we're talking about.
Yeah, who's actually listening? We don't even put this out on the air, do we?
I don't know. I thought
We've
we
been,
didn't.
we've been releasing these.
Oh God,
Jesus
I've said so
Christ.
many stupid things.
I've committed to
Okay,
things.
right.
I've
Episode
committed to
over.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Little does Toby know
Episode
he's walking
over.
home tonight.
Toby apparently is walking home now. All right, bye.
Fuck you, Joe. Episode over.
Bye.
Bye. MC
Bye.
Guinness out.
Bye.